Hello, everybody, and welcome to You're Ready for GenAI is Your Content, where we're going to look at preparing and analyzing your data content for GenAI implementation. My name is Amanda Patterson. I am a senior consultant at Comtech Services that has been in business for 40 years doing all kinds of consulting for information development and organization. We specialize in data implementations, ECMS implementations. We work with wonderful companies like Adobe, and to get everybody's content AI ready, along with getting into structured authoring. We also host CIDM, which is the Center for Information Development and Management, as a professional organization for technical communicators, UX, CX folks, to learn more about data, learn more about content strategy, and all that good stuff. I do have a PhD in comparative literature. My specialization is science fiction and the philosophy of mind, and that's kind of my entry into AI. And then where I really come into this for Comtech is I've spent the better part of 15 or so years working with technical communicators and teaching writing and managing tech comms and doing all kinds of implementations and stuff like that. And so I'm coming to you from in front of the desk, behind the desk, and lifelong student and AI enthusiast. And so today I want to share with you a couple of things that I've learned. And first of all, we're going to talk about, what are your deliverables with AI? And then we're going to look at optimizing your content and optimizing it specifically for AI. So, and not necessarily specifically kind of like the reuse strategy that we normally think of with content optimization, but really how to make it work for your LLMs. And then we're going to question, do we need to indicate when content is AI generated? And if so, where? And then we're going to spend a few minutes just kind of highlighting the importance of metadata and taxonomy, because without metadata and taxonomy, the rest of the system really isn't going to work well for you. And with that, let's get into this. So let's talk about deliverables. And this is really the question of, with GenAI, how are your deliverables going to change? What new deliverables do you need? What deliverables do you need to let go of? What happens with minimalism and all these kinds of questions? So there's just a lot of factors in this, and yes, text heavy slide, and yes, that's a lot of questions, because how you answer each of these is really going to get you to, what deliverables are needed. And it is a question that I love, because people think that there's I have a punch list of a list of deliverables that everybody needs to make this happen. And the fact is there's just a lot of factors in here to consider. So things of like, the biggest one, and this is really the key question for most of this presentation, is what type of implementation are you working on? Are you working on, say, a tools upgrade from, for example, on-prem AEM guides to AEM guides to cloud version? And with that, you can get the writing assistant within the tool itself. That is technically AI implementation. That kind of tools upgrade is not going to be nearly the same lift as if we're talking the implementation of an entire private LLM involving, IT, AI governance, RAG, databases, and then, maybe some sort of virtual chat assistant, a VCA, that is entirely AI powered. That kind of implementation is going to require a lot more work into it. So when we talk about what deliverables do you need, you're going to have to scale it and make that decision of, are we doing a smaller implementation with less stuff? Or are we doing a much larger implementation where we're going to really need to think this through? The other question, obviously, is if you are even doing a large implementation in a private LLM, what in your product scope does it have to support? Is it supporting everything you have ever created, every product you offer? Or is the scale of the AI implementation already scoped in such a way that you know which product groups or single or how many versions you need to support? Similarly, with all of this is, what are the business goals? Because depending on the business goal is going to help you determine also what kind of implementation. If your business goal is simply to get higher quality content out of your authors, and then you're probably looking at one of those tools upgrades so that you can program that with your style guide to improve the quality of your writing. If your business goal is to decrease call volume, then you're looking at a bigger implementation, again, with different deliverables. How are you training? What kind of training content are you going to need in that? We're going to talk about this a little bit more. Again, if you're supporting every product that you have ever created and every version of it in your virtual chat assistant, you're going to need a much bigger database. You're going to need much bigger everything to test to see that all of those things are going to be working well. Testing and validation, same thing. The other part, again, leading into the question that I asked earlier is, what kind of notices and admonitions are you going to need? Where do you tell people that it is AI generated? Do you need to tell your users that it's AI generated? What do they expect? We're going to dig into some of those questions a little later too, in some detail. And the other part to this, in terms of deliverables that people tend to forget, is what kind of project documentation is required? So you have a major implementation here. Do you need a project plan? Do you need a budget? Do you need slide decks? Do you need, a Gantt chart? Or do you need testing scenarios? Do you need reports and dashboards and stuff like that? I mean, it is still a project. It's, it's a little bit more than I'd say the typical doc project, but is that something that you're running and you're creating and that you need to be aware of? And again, a kind of a little bit more specific of things to consider when you are looking at your deliverables, but you're going to need content for training and validation of your LLM, whether it's you training or, an IT team, which is kind of the direction we're starting to see most people go in. But you then, if you're training it and you're validating it, that implies that you're testing it. So how are you testing it? What do those test scenarios look like? They're probably things like, your support cases, your help tickets, your requests. What do people want? What are they struggling with? Those are going to be great things that a virtual chat assistant can really help solve for without reinventing everything in your content stack. When we start talking about, validating the actual system of the LLM, there's a lot of work that can be done with scripting and monitoring and analytics and stuff like that. But how are they doing that? Are there test scripts that need to be run? Is it a feature just of the LLM that you have partnered with to do this? Who is monitoring it? Is there something that has to be run manually? What's the frequency? All of that kind of maintenance question. Prompt libraries have become an interesting option in this, in the simple sense that, a couple of years ago, I didn't really understand the importance of prompt libraries, and I kind of didn't get it, I want to be honest. But my opinion on these have been changing, and so these prompt libraries may be a collection of your system prompts. They may be a collection of prompts that you use regularly, such as, summarize the subject matter expert data for, put it into 2 paragraphs, 3 bulleted lists, or something like that. Like whatever that information dump that we get from subject matter experts is, what is that first sacrificial draft of content that you want out of it? We don't need writers typing that out every time. So those kinds of things are really great to have in prompt libraries, particularly if you get them really working well in the type of content and with the people that you are working with. So, you may want to consider a prompt library. Again, process documentation and change management. How do you, what changes in your processes with the use of AI and the option to use AI? In terms of change management, how do you change it? How do you change the system if you need to? You've done some testing, you're not getting answers that you want. what is it going to take to update RAG or to figure out why are you not getting the answers that you need. So all of these things are areas that AI specifically has been impacting that are causing us to change our deliverables as content teams. The other thing in this is that I didn't put is what if the AI is the user? Does the AI have the experience that it needs to operate your product? And what is that going to do to things like minimalism? The other part in all of this, and again, kind of tying into back to the support cases, is have you talked to other teams? What do other teams need out of this? If you're pulling together a private LLM for internal research, like new hires want to research your product to understand it better without weeks and weeks of training and having, handheld by senior associates, is there additional content that you can put into it to feed it, or does it need the engineering reports in order to get the better answers and kind of process the information that we humans are doing to give a complete and robust answer out the other side? So what do these other teams need? What do these other teams have? And how can that really help you, create deliverables, collect deliverables, maybe fill in some gaps and determine what do I need to have at hand and what does my, to make my LM run the way that I want it to. Okay. So then the question is like, hey, Amanda, that's great. I have all of this stuff. But how do I know that the content is going to be utilized by the LLM? And that's a great question, because particularly if your LLM has to support archived content, depending on how far back you have to go and when you have moved into DITA, you're going to get questions about, is it structured? How do I get it to read it? Do I have native files? How are we getting that content in there? So let's take a look at this. And this is also a great place where if AI is still kind of a little bit more of a buzzword and there's no concrete plans for implementing, you can start working on these kinds of things to get your content prepped so that when the day comes and you are asked to feed the LM, you're going to be ready. And honestly, we're just going to do what we do best. We are going to make content modular and structured, right? So if you're not in DITA and you're here learning all about it, highly recommend DITA as an option for structuring your content. It's an open source standard. But you also, for those of us who are in DITA, if you don't have templates, you want to get involved in that. If you have a standard structure, that's great. It might not be DITA. There's a couple of other options in there, but the AI loves structure because it is still a machine. It is still reading kind of the text or the code or source views of our content. And I think those of us who are like, yeah, we've been in DITA forever, we're fine. I really ask you to question your granularity. If you want answer-based results, for example, when I Google how tall is Andre the Giant, I don't necessarily want the full Wikipedia article about Andre the Giant. I just want to know how tall he was. Well, in most of our DITA things, yes, we have one idea per topic, but how big are those topics? Is there key pieces of information that we can tag in such a way that becomes a very specific answer? Because how tall he is might be in a topic I don't know, I want to say specifications about Andre the Giant, but that sounds disingenuous. But if it's buried sort of in that, how much did his body metrics? Well, I don't want all that information when I Google how tall is Andre the Giant. So really contemplate granularity. And there's a lot of ways to get there. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to go and rewrite all of your topics. It might be adding a layer of metadata. It might be, phrasing and adding some ideas and stuff, or some ID tags and stuff like that in there. Obviously, clear language is the best thing here. Think minimalism in writing, think global standard English. Less is more, clean, clear, gets us into concise and consistent. Get rid of your redundancies, standardize all of your terminology. If you haven't done this work in a little while, it's a good opportunity to go back and just verify all of the decisions that you've made. It's a great time to review your style guide to make sure that you are using current best practices and, making sure that decisions that were made however long ago are still valid. So check your standardized terminology, check your clear, concise language, all of that good stuff. Retrievable and AI-friendly content is our tagging, is our semantic tagging, is our syntactical tagging, is our metadata, it's our IDs, it's all of our attributes, it's everything that we do in DITA to a new level of granularity, I think, that a lot of us are going to find. And again, just because the AI or the LLM isn't giving you the right output, it doesn't necessarily mean generate new content. It might be a metadata structuring question about, well, I have this content here and I don't really want it into topics. Think about how we tag it. And then obviously you are all here because it is a DITA conference, and so you are working in XML, which is a broader DITA-based language. But really the big part here is the AI is, capital case A, artificial, lowercase I, intelligent. And the problem is that it's not going to be able to, consciously read and comprehend a PDF. It is still reading coding languages. And these are just kind of the questions that we were really just talking about. Are you in structured authoring? How modular is that content? So that's also looking at your writing principles. Do you say things like, next or previously and stuff like that where you're looking more, yes, it's topic based, but your actual writing is long form, because all of that needs to come out again, because you really need to be being able to put the pieces from one to the other. And I think the other part here in modularity is granularity. And I probably should put a little bit more of that on the slides. Clean structure. Just because we are in DITA and just because we are in structured authoring, if we have not optimized that authoring environment, we could have multiple structures doing the same thing, which is where I go, I want to bring up, you want some schematron rules, you want templates, you want a strong information model and solid information architecture, and to make sure that it, again, is adhering to today's best practices, because best practices for 10, 15 years ago may not be applicable today. I would also suggest that you're probably going to want to start looking at upgrading to DITA 2.0. I know that we've been talking about that for a while. Standard isn't quite released yet, but you're going to want to start looking ahead if you can. And I think the other big thing is, in terms of optimizing your content, it has to be driven by what do you want the LLM to find. Is there content that you have available that has been previously trained on that you don't want it to find? And if it's critical content, is it all tagged consistently for the LM to read the source code and find that content based on the questions that it's been providing, or in some cases based on the writing style that you want out of it. Designing for search and summarization, because and I pull this one out specifically because it's really important. We found in our study a lot of people are using it to summarize long documents. We're using it to assist in search. People are slowly moving from Googling it to prompting it in an LLM, which means that this whole research and summarization part, as opposed to the, write me a haiku about DITA kind of prompts, it's shifting, and we're really starting to get into it's not just a fun toy anymore. It really is this powerful search and analysis engine that we're developing. So what makes that work is, again, granularity and modularity of content in our tags. So yes, I am saying syntactical and structural tags a lot because they are that and your metadata and taxonomy. So the reuse and structure of using those tags is so important. But also things like, I know a lot of us find writing short descriptions incredibly painful and time consuming and annoying, but by summarizing that, you're helping the LLM sort through the content faster, and you're actually providing it with a summary or a partial summary so that it's less content that the LLM has to actually read, comprehend, and then provide a summary for. So if you have short descriptions, in 100 topics that create a 200-page printed document, it's much easier for the LLM to read through those short descriptions and kind of summarize that into a paragraph, as opposed to having it read essentially all 200 pages and then generate and create its own summary. Short descriptions might also be the key for, again, your answer-based search, where it just gives the answer and doesn't, you can still pull the citation in of where it came from, but it's not providing the entire document of somewhere in this document is your answer. So again, and it kind of repeats this, summarize key points somewhere, put in introductions. If you're not using short descriptions, a good introduction can be in there. And yes, if you're really thinking about this, depending on where you are in your implementation and what you're planning to do, you can use your LLMs to help write your short descriptions and your introductions to your topics. And then they can, when you publish that, then the LLMs can read those too. So, really think outside the box on this. It doesn't have to be a whole heavy lift of manual work on it. And then again, we should all be using alt text at this point for all of our accessibility concerns, but it's very hard for an LLM to simply read a JPEG or an image file of any kind. So providing the alt text that is clear, consistent, and reliable is really going to help, again, provide the context and the information for the LLM. So if you're not using alt text yet, that's a great first step or second step at this point to get your content AI ready. As I mentioned earlier, minimalism in writing: clean, clear, avoid the redundancies, avoid unnecessary detail, emphasize critical information. All of these things are really just going to help the LLM focus. If you are concerned about hallucinations and degradation of content, really look at your writing. On the topic level, on the actual writing sentence levels, your writing has to be super clean. The cleaner it is, the better the answer's out. I mean, everything about LLMs is what we've known for a long time. Garbage in is garbage out. And that principle isn't going away. So the cleaner your writing, the cleaner your answers. It also means, as you're troubleshooting, you can probably find the answer of why did I get this answer from my virtual chat assistant? This doesn't make sense. The cleaner you're writing, the easier it is to kind of trace back where did that odd answer come from. RAG is your friend. There's a couple of different ways to do it. I am cautious about recommending FAQ sections for common queries because FAQs tend, in theory, they are great, which is why I put them on the screen. But in practice, what tends to happen is that everything that doesn't have a home, that is, quote, miscellaneous, then gets dumped into an FAQ, and that doesn't really help your situation either. So the idea behind the FAQ for common queries in this is maybe it's not an FAQ, maybe it's a topic. Because again, the LLM does not need it in a document. It needs it within a knowledge graph and within a body of information to draw context from. If you wanted to troubleshoot, include that. But remember, all of these things here, the FAQs, the troubleshooting, the named entity recognition, are really because it's a machine, and as a machine, it doesn't have any lived experience. So you have to give it that information. Now, you may already be producing this content. It's about getting it into your RAG system. But if you're not, I mean, think about, you have a lot of experience, for example, using a mouse and clicking a mouse. And, if you went from PC to Mac, yeah, there might have been a slight learning curve on how to use a Mac mouse, but you experienced it. You did not need to look up how to use it, probably. But that is a physical tactile experience that the LLM will not have, and it will never have. So that's why things like the FAQ section, the troubleshooting, the name entity recognition really come into play here, because you have to tell the LLM everything. So you really have to feed the beast on this. And this is a place where minimalism starts to kind of fail, because you need to give it a lot of content and a lot of context to get the correct answers out the other side. Minimalism is going to help you minimize your context windows. So remember, topics need to be one idea per topic, because the context window of what you are requesting from the LLM and what the LLM can give you out has limitations, and that's going to depend on your implementation. So this is a great time if you have a lot of sections in your topics. Really take a hard look at, do they have to be sections, or should they truly be topics? And I am a proponent that, sections always give me pause for concern, because if I have to break that idea into multiple sections, is it truly one idea? And the answer might still be yes, but that's a good place to really think about it, because then you can send less content to your LLM at any given time. So, okay, so now we know what our deliverables are. We know how we're changing our content. And if we are delivering the GenAI content, do we have to indicate that? And when we did our survey in last year in 2024, we saw that 41% of people are not indicating. And that at first gave me a lot to pause. And then you see the next big is that we have a note. And so it got me looking, and I dug a little deeper. And what we found is that there are basically 3 or so levels of indicating GenAI content. There's a note at the start, like what I'm showing on the screen from Copilot and ChatGPT. I think these are basically the same today. A lot of people are then putting it in their legal terms and conditions, so it's not at the forefront of the information, but it is in the, it's in the licensing. The other place that I think is really important is captioning text and images, and particularly images, as we are living in a time of deep fakes and all kinds of AI generated videos and stuff. Of what is the expectation to maintain trust with your users? What are their expectations? And again, this will be dependent on your type of implementation. If you are doing, say, the upgrade from AM guides on-prem to cloud to get the writing assistant, do you need to indicate that that's AI generated? Probably not. I mean, we've never said, like, well, I'm using Word spell check, so why would I do it there? However, in the cases like I'm showing here, these are AI generated responses. There is no human, there is no, there isn't A to B programming of, if I ask this question, I always get this answer. It might be, it's probably important to tell your users that it is AI generated. Some of the things to consider when trying to make this decision are your laws and regulations. The EU AI Act has some very strict and very specific recommendations for that, so you may want to go check them out to make sure that you are adhering to them. Again, as we just said, it depends on your type of implementation. Something smaller, writing assistant based, probably not. And I think the other big part is, what do your audiences expect? Everything that we do has to serve our audience. So do they expect it to be identified? And that expectation is probably based on, how is transparency defined for your company? Are you very transparent? Are you not, because you have a lot of, data, or you're highly regulated government contractor, something like that? I mean, It varies, but these are the kinds of questions that you should be asking about your content in terms of trying to decide whether or not to indicate that it is AI generated. Okay, so as promised, metadata and taxonomy is underpinning all of this. And why? Because it's improving our search, it's helping with a guard against hallucinations, it's supporting, again, the multimodality of queries, because if you haven't tried it, you can go to almost any of the LLMs and use voice to text technology from your device and talk into it and query that way. I have used it fairly extensively on AI guides. It is fantastic. If you log in on, at the time I had to use my phone, but it, that text window that opens up where you can hit the little microphone, it is fantastic. Now, that works because there's metadata and taxonomy that recognizes what all these elements are. So if you want that kind of support, that's going to be some doing on your content. Everything has to be to enhance the user experience, and it is about accessibility, it's about relevance, it's about usability. Because now you have an LLM really doing the heavy lifting of searching and finding and reporting out that your audience used to have to do either, in our paper manuals back in the day or using a flat search. So what do you want your users to find? What are their pain points? How do you get them to that content faster? And all of this is starting to ask the question. This is a great time, again, even if you're not in an LLM yet, to really look at what is my content reuse strategy. Because we're in DITA, we all have our module content. So is it reuse strategy based on user, based on product, based on keyword? How are we doing that, and how do we need to, what do we need to do to make that better? How are we slicing our data? So how am I engaging with it and cutting it? Is there different ways to slice the data to get a different answer or a faster answer? What is my metadata strategy? And that is your taxonomy of how do I tag? Why do I tag? What are the tags called? All of that. How am I actually implementing it to get the most out of my reuse strategy? And then the other thing is, in order to get all of these fun analytics and data and graphs and all those things that we love, is that the system has to hook into something. So are there analytics that you want? Do you need new tags to make all those analytics work? And a lot of this is going to be in partnership probably with, whatever team is running the LLM project, but they're all things that you want to ask about. So I've thrown a lot of information at you in a very short time. So what do we do next? And the short answer is don't let it sit. Get up and start doing stuff. Take action. Take action now. A lot of these things, even if you start with like a simple project list, but don't just sit and go, okay, well, I can't start this until, Q4 of this year. Make a list of these questions. Save this presentation. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of great ones here at DITA World that you can also save. Start evaluating your content now. You can kind of take this presentation, make it into a little checklist, and see where you are today. What content do you have? How are people accessing it? How do you review that content? How do you develop content? Are there small wins in your content development that you can get from a smaller AI implementation to get budgeting and buy-in for a larger one? And the big one that I think everybody forgets about is, what do the LLMs already know about your content? And for those of you that are going, they know nothing, it's behind firewalls, please do yourself a favor and go and prompt them about specific questions about your content and ask all of them and see what you get out of it. It is amazing what is on the internet. And I don't think that we yet truly understand how deep into the internet we have those companies scraped to create this technology. But the other part is, are they pulling your competitors' content and not your content? And what are the ramifications of that? Do you need to start feeding the public LLMs, which means making your content more public? Big questions, lots of different answers. But that's something you can start today. Start doing your user research and start identifying all of your users, particularly your LLM as user, because with the RAG system, the LLM has to read your RAG content somehow, some way. That means that even your private LLM is a user of your content. And that's all the questions about optimizing your content for AI. How is this new user going to access your content? It has no concept of what it means to log into something. So how does it get there? For internal, external users, internal, external LLMs, and think user analysis, customer journeys. Can you put a customer advisory board together? What are your analytics do you have to make these decisions, if you have any? What are your personas? Do you now probably need a new persona, if not two, maybe more, for each stage of your implementation and of the different LLMs that are involved. So you can start doing all this user research so that you're making educated decisions about implementation and about how to fix what content to fix, what content to include, and all of that good stuff. Now, I have probably overwhelmed a lot of you, and that's okay. Stick with me. Is that break it into smaller projects, and if you have a large team, break it into subcommittees and do it bite-sized. It's one piece at a time. The whole thing really is a tangled web of pushes and pulls, and new users means new messaging, means new presentation, means new message, presentation to messaging to presentation, and building this whole content strategy ecosystem here. But you can do it in just one bite at a time, the same way you eat that elephant. Give, whether these are one person or a team of people working on each project, just slowly build into it, and you're going to be fine at the outcome. And all of this can be done ahead of any sort of formal LLM implementation, and probably should be, so that way you know what the workload and what the real lift is to get your content AI ready. And then you can layer those into your performance objectives throughout the year, so that you're ahead of the game. And with that, I wish you good luck and thank you. One short shameless plug is, if you are very excited about this and very anxious about this, Comtech does offer a course called Including AI in Your Content Strategy, taught by yours truly. We'll be starting that up again in the fall. And also this fall, I will be teaching a workshop at LavaCon, similarly on AI and content strategy. And if you have any questions or comments or concerns, we have a few minutes, I think, to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a wonderful DITA World 2025.